Chapter 2488. Similarly, Yueshin can only sign one contract. When Yiling died, his remaining aura was left behind by Yueshin in the Phoenix God Mountain. And because of the existence of this aura, the life contract has remained until now. Previously, I always thought that Yiling would use this life contract to return, but I didn't expect that he would transfer this contract to you. The evil spirit laughed. Perhaps he also knows that the remains buried in Phoenix Cry Mountain can no longer help Yueshin ignite the divine fire. With just a few words, Tuanzi was completely shocked on the spot. This means she subconsciously turned back and looked at Chu Luyue. Their eyes met. Chu Luyue closed his eyes to hide the turbulence in his eyes. Dumpling's heart suddenly sank. This is real. That voice seemed to carry some kind of bewitching power. Look at Phoenix Cry Mountain. Dumpling's body stiffened as she turned to look at Phoenix Cry Mountain behind the illusory god palace. It was steep and steep. Balls of reddish gold flames burned silently on it. The moment you opened your 9 meridians, Yiling's body and soul were truly destroyed. As the evil spirit spoke, he suddenly raised his sword and swung it down fiercely. Seeing this, Maozhen was shocked. No. However, his voice was quickly drowned out by the deafening roar. Chi-boom! The sword aura flew to Phoenix Cry Mountain and crashed heavily. In an instant, the earth shook, and the mountain shook as endless flames soared into the sky. The huge Phoenix Cry Mountain began to collapse. However, at this moment, a dragon's roar suddenly came from the foot of Phoenix Cry Mountain. Hearing this dragon's roar, everyone was stunned. The evil spirit said that Yiling's corpse was buried under Phoenix Cry Mountain. Then what was this dragon's roar about? Soon the entire Phoenix Cry Mountain was razed to the ground. A deep pit suddenly appeared in front of everyone's eyes. There were actually 2 skeletons buried in it. One was the reddish gold heavenly phoenix, which was Yiling back then. The other was clearly the great phoenix dragon. It went without saying who the owner of this skeleton was. The ancestor of the great phoenix dragon race, Maoyu. Flames burned in the surroundings, and the high temperature almost caused the space to distort. Right at this moment, another sword chi arrived in an instant. When the astonishing pressure descended, the 2 skeletons began to be silently crushed into powder. Dumpling was shocked. Maozhen quickly rushed over, both shocked and furious. What are you doing? Ancestor Maoyu suppressed Feng Ming Mountain for 10,000 years for you. Maoyu did it for me. The evil spirit sneered as if it had heard a joke. Back then, if it hadn't used this as a condition, would your great Phoenix Dragon clan have been able to survive until today? 10,000 years ago, the Great Void Phoenix Dragon and the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix were both ancient divine beasts. However, Goddess Yueshin favored the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix more. Not only did she stay at Phoenix Cry Mountain, she even signed a life contract with Yiling. But even so, Maoyu refused to join forces with it no matter what. It made a mental note of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon. Later on, when Yiling died, it used all its means to take back Yiling's remains and buried them under Phoenix Cry Mountain. It knew about the existence of the life contract, so it always thought that as long as it guarded Yiling's remains, it could weaken Goddess Yueshin's power in the future and increase its chances of winning. Moreover, Yiling had opened his 9th meridian. Even though he was dead, his remains still contained an extremely shocking power. In the past few years, it had also ordered people to bring back the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix clansmen and used the power of Phoenix Cry Mountain to forcefully open their meridians. Unfortunately, the results were not satisfactory. Later on, it gradually gave up. It only collected the power of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's bloodline, from time to continue burning the divine fire of the Chaos Holy Jade. At that time, because the power in Yiling's remains could not be underestimated, it found Maoyu and threatened her with the lives of her clansmen, forcing her to commit suicide. Together with them, they were suppressed at Phoenix Cry Mountain to suppress Yiling's power. Maozhen felt as if she was struck by lightning. Well, what did you say? Ancestor didn't surrender to you of his own accord? The evil spirit waved the sword in its hand and smiled casually. Only now do you understand? Since Dumpling had already opened her 9th meridian, and Yiling had completely fallen, there was no need to keep Mao Yu's remains. As for the Great Phoenix Dragon clan, it also did not take it to heart. Therefore, it said those words very casually, frankly, and with a sense of lofty arrogance. Mao Zhen was completely stunned. After that chaos, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan became a sinful clan, and the Great Phoenix Dragon clan also left the Illusion God Palace after receiving Taizu Mao Yu's orders. All the clansmen thought that Mao Yu did this to avoid conflict, so they never returned to the Illusion God Palace after that. Until this time, when the Heaven Gate opened, and Mao Zhen returned to pay respects to her ancestors. Including him, all the Great Phoenix Dragon clan leaders thought that ancestor Mao Yu had made that choice herself. Because of this, he had been feeling very complicated ever since he came to the Illusion God Palace. He never expected that it was the evil spirit who threatened the lives of his clansmen to force Mao Yu to do this. Indescribable anger and hatred instantly surged from the bottom of his heart. Mao Zhen's body trembled slightly. Then a shocking power suddenly exploded from his body. Roar! Mao Zhen transformed into her true form. The next moment, her dragon tail swung fiercely at the evil spirit. Almost at the same time, Dumpling also reacted. She flapped her wings and flew up, waving 2 fireballs. 2 ancient divine beasts attacked from the left and right. However, the evil spirit did not seem to panic. With a thought, the silver-red divine territory surged and spread out. In an instant, it formed a boundary around his body. Dumpling and Mao Yu's attack power was directly reduced by more than half. I said before that Yi Ling and Mao Yu were not my match back then, let alone the 2 of you. As his voice fell, that silver-red divine territory surged like a river and spread even further away. It seemed that he intended to directly include Tuanzi and Mao Zhen in it. However, at this moment, a soft sound suddenly came. Clang! It seemed to be the sound of a stone rolling on the ground. Dumpling turned back and saw an irregularly shaped stone the size of a fist suddenly rolling to her side. Clang! Another stone rolled to the side. 3rd stone. 4th stone. More and more stones flew out from Chuliuyue's universe ring. In the blink of an eye, these stones had already scattered and occupied half of the sky. The silver-red divine territory's surging speed began to visibly slow down. The evil spirit suddenly said, "This is a battle between you and me. If Mao Zhen attacks, it will be breaking the rules." Mao Zhen was extremely angry. "You killed our ancestor. This hatred, the Great Void Phoenix Dragon clan, is absolutely irreconcilable with you." The evil spirit seemed to laugh. "You want to attack?" Before Mao Zhen could say anything, she heard a cold and harsh voice. "He can't fight with you, but I should be qualified." Chapter 2489. That was Zichen's voice. He moved and arrived beside Mao Zhen in the blink of an eye. "Senior Mao Zhen, leave the rest to me." Mao Zhen was unwilling. Seeing his ancestors' remains being destroyed with his own eyes had already made him extremely angry. Now that he knew the truth, he was even more furious. All he wanted to do now was to kill her completely. But it was indeed inappropriate for him to interfere in this battle. Otherwise, he would be giving others something to use against him. Zichun was Chuliuyue's contracted magical beast, so he naturally had the right to interfere. Mao Zhen tried his best to calm the waves in his heart, and finally retreated. The evil spirit looked at Zichun. "You're just a 3-eyed eagle that has fused with the power of a great phoenix dragon's bloodline. How dare you be so arrogant? Even if Mao Zhen came, only death would await her, let alone you? It's not over yet. The outcome is unknown. It's too early for you to say these words." After Zichun finished speaking, a purple gold eye suddenly opened between his eyebrows. The surrounding silver-red divine realm was torn apart, perhaps because it was clamped by those stones. At this time, the red-gold flames were also approaching the evil spirit. The battle ahead was fierce, and Chuliuyue's side was also splashing with sparks. Streams of Tianlei came one after another, constantly tempering the star darkness sword in her hand. That sword was almost like a bottomless pit, absorbing all the Tianlei, and had no intention of stopping. She has already swallowed thousands of Tianlei, right? Why isn't it over yet? Did all the power contained in those Tianlei really go into that sword? How shocking is that? Maybe she can really succeed? Who knows? The Tianlei in the lightning pool has already been reduced by a third. Could it be that she wanted to make the entire lightning pool empty? All kinds of discussions were going on. Countless pairs of eyes were staring at the sky, not daring to miss a single thing. A faint pressure gradually spread out from the Star Spectre sword. Illusionary God see. Time passed slowly. Under Diwu Zhang's guidance, Mu Hongyu finally pushed the spatial energy to its original position. Of course, during this process she was inevitably injured, and there were many wounds on her body. This was especially true for his hands, which had been squeezed and cut by several spatial forces, causing dozens of bloody wounds to appear on them. It looked like it was already badly mutilated. Diwu Zhang's heart ached. However, Mu Hongyu didn't seem to care. Her eyes were still bright and full of fighting spirit. Finally, after some work, the pressure on the barrier began to gradually decrease. The originally somewhat dazzling light also dimmed a little. This made Mu Hongyu even more excited. She began to concentrate even more on moving and clearing away the last of the spatial energy. Crack! Following this crisp sound, a crack finally appeared on the barrier. Mu Hongyu was overjoyed. Diwu Zhangze immediately said, "Hongyu, step back." "Yes." Mu Hongyu responded. With a tap of her toes, she quickly retreated. Diwu Zhangze waved his sleeves. In the next moment, the crack began to spread rapidly to the surroundings. In the blink of an eye, it was like a spider web crawling all over. Diwu Zhangze held his breath and focused, crossing his hands in front of him. Boom! The barrier collapsed. At the same time, the Xian formation under Diwu Zhang's feet also began to crack. With a move of his body he rushed out of it. "Master!" Mu Hongyu finally heaved a sigh of relief. Suddenly, she glanced out of the corner of her eye and saw something flickering under the rapidly collapsing Xian formation. She was stunned and took a closer look. Then she realized that under the Xian formation, there was actually a sword. Diwu Zhangze originally planned to take her away, but in the blink of an eye, he saw that she was staring in a certain direction, entranced. He followed her line of sight and was also shocked. "Why is this sword here?" Mu Hongyu turned her head. "Master, you know it? This is Yu Jio's sword," Diwu Zhangze said. Mu Hongyu's heart suddenly lit up. "Really? That's too much of a coincidence. Yu Jio even asked me to help find this sword just now. I didn't expect to bump into it here." Diwu Zhangze frowned slightly, then sneered. "What a painstaking effort. Who would have thought that this sword was hidden here? If Mu Hongyu hadn't come to save him, no one would be able to find this place, even after hundreds or thousands of years." Mu Hongyu said, "I'll go get the sword." "Wait." Diwu Zhangze stopped her. "This sword is extremely sharp and powerful. Ordinary people can't touch it. Call Yu Jio over and get it personally." Mu Hongyu was stunned for a moment, but she didn't ask further. "Okay." As she spoke, a bell suddenly appeared in her hand, and she shook it gently. Ding! The crisp sound of the bell instantly spread far and wide. Yu Jio was waiting on the silver bridge. When he heard the sound of the bell, he was instantly delighted. So fast. He moved and quickly headed in the direction of the sound of the bell. The Xian formation suppressing Diwu Zhangze had already collapsed. The chaotic spatial power under the sea had also been adjusted and restored, becoming orderly again. Yu Jio's journey was practically unimpeded. When he arrived at the depths of the sea, he quickly saw Mu Hongyu and Diwu Zhangze beside her. Yu Jio approached them, and his expression changed slightly. "Senior Diwu Yu." His body was translucent, and his breath was weak. It was obvious that he had suffered a lot. Diwu Zhangze waved his hand. "I'm fine. Go and get the sword first." Yu Jio thought for a moment, then nodded and headed toward the center of the collapsed Xian formation. He held the sword hilt with both hands, and his expression became serious. Then he slowly and firmly took it out. In an instant brilliant light shone. Mu Hongyu widened her eyes slightly. This was a huge green sword. The sword's spine was thick and heavy, but the sword's edge was extremely sharp. It was 8 feet long, slightly taller than Yu Jio. Some strange patterns were engraved on the sword's body. Mu Hongyu looked at it, and felt that it was vaguely familiar. After taking a closer look, she suddenly thought of something and pointed at the huge green sword. Why are the patterns on it so similar to the ones on the barrier at the heaven gate? Yu Jio was touching the sword lovingly, and he was so excited that tears almost filled his eyes. Only the heavens knew how sad it was for him to hold a small wooden sword every day for all these years. Hearing Mu Hongyu's words, he snorted. Of course it's because this sword was also made by Big Brother. Mu Hongyu was stunned for a moment, before she suddenly understood what was going on. So the barrier at the heaven gate was his. Yu Jio flicked his finger on the sword's body. Buzz! A deep and heavy sword sound spread far and wide. He stroked his chin in satisfaction. It's not just the heaven gate. The entire barrier of the illusory god palace was made by Tsinyi. Chapter 2490. Mu Hongyu sucked in a cold breath. She had long known that Tsinyi was powerful, but she didn't expect him to be. The 13 Yu guards were the 13 divine envoys of the illusory god palace. This had been proven just now. There was no doubt about it. And it was obvious that they each had their own duties. But before this, because Tsinyi had never appeared, Mu Hongyu didn't think of him. After hearing Yu Jio's words, she understood. She couldn't help but be shocked. That's right. In that case, he's the real first divine envoy. And this illusory god ocean, is he also in charge of it? Yu Jio gave her an admiring look. Diwu Zhangzi looked up and said, "We have to go back as soon as possible." Boom! Bang! An incomparably powerful force attacked, and Zichen's body fell heavily to the ground. After a series of battles, his entire body was covered in wounds and bloodstains. If I'm not wrong, there's a wing bone of the great phoenix dragon in your body. The evil spirit looked down at Zichen. How inappropriate. After saying that, it flicked its wrist, and the black and red sword suddenly flew out and went straight for Zichen's left shoulder. Whoosh! A ball of reddish gold flame suddenly swept out and blocked the sword's path. The evil spirit didn't seem to care, and reached out from its sleeve. It was a jet black hand. It was the hand that had been suppressed under the Thousand Wine Mountain. Then its finger gently pointed forward. A black light instantly flew out like a sharp arrow. Dumpling had a bad feeling, and immediately wanted to stop it. Zichen was shocked. Dumpling! Be careful! Swoosh! The black light flew past Dumpling's wings, and went straight for Zichen. He was about to move when he suddenly saw the silver-red divine realm suddenly descend from the sky. At the same time, a cold and powerful pressure crushed toward him, making him unable to move. Then the black light arrived in an instant. Whoosh! Zichen's shoulder was instantly pierced. His shoulder blade was instantly shattered by this force. Zichen's face turned pale, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Then, the black light continued to wreak havoc in his body, madly devouring his strength. Zichen's aura quickly weakened. Seeing this, Dumpling's eyes burned with flames. In the Red Moon Desert, such a scene had already happened once. Unexpectedly, there was actually a second time. Whoosh! She flapped her wings and a gust of wind rose. The reddish gold flames in the sky moved with the wind, constantly devouring the energy in the surroundings, forming a sea of fire that surrounded the evil spirit. Chi-chi. Under the burning of the flames, the sword emitted a series of strange sounds. Gradually, the blood color on it faded bit by bit. Following such a change, the terrifying aura of the sword was also being weakened. Dumpling perked up. The other party didn't seem to be completely unafraid of the flames. The evil spirit seemed to have sensed the danger as well, and the pressure around it became even stronger. Those scarlet eyes looked at Chu Luyue. At this time, the Star Spectre sword in front of her was still being refined. The crack had been completely repaired, and could no longer be seen. Only bits of starlight were left, quietly flickering. Like the stars in the dark night, they were shining brightly. At this time, 2/3 of the Tian lay in the lightning pool, had already been merged into the sword. It had to end this quickly. Thinking of this, it attacked again. Several black lights flew out at the same time. Dumpling spread her wings, and flames soared into the sky, defending with all her might. Suddenly, the evil spirit raised its hand. That silver-red god domain suddenly dissipated. This move came very suddenly. Chu Liyue's 3000 god domain had been in a stalemate with it. Now that the power of this god domain was suddenly torn apart, the side that lost the power to contend Chu Liyue's power instantly went out of control. Taking advantage of this moment, the evil spirit moved and appeared behind Chu Liyue. Without hesitation, it punched out, going straight for Chu Liyue's back. Dumpling's eyes suddenly flashed with a hint of shock. A biting cold wind attacked from behind, and Chu Liyue's heart instantly tensed up. At this time, Zichen suddenly broke free from the restraints of the god domain and rushed forward. Boom! This punch landed squarely on Zichen's chest. You overestimate yourself. The low and hoarse voice was filled with undisguised mockery and contempt. Then, everyone saw a cloud of black fog suddenly spread out from the evil spirit's hand, instantly enveloping Zichen's body. Vaguely, they could even hear the sound of bones shattering. Blood that was suffused with black gas gradually dripped down. Bang! Dumpling rushed over as fast as she could. However, it was already too late. The cloud of black fog quickly shrank and finally dissipated. Only a translucent remnant soul was left, bound by the evil spirit's palm-sized black cage, and held tightly in its hand. A black feather came with the wind and quietly floated down. There were a few scarlet spots on it. Then, the evil spirit looked up at Tuanzi and said slowly, "I'm sorry." A crimson gold heavenly phoenix with 9 meridians opened. It's really rare. It's a pity to kill it like this. If it hadn't been for this, it would have killed Tuanzi long ago instead of dragging it out until now. But Chu Liyue's sword was about to be completed. No matter what, this battle couldn't continue waiting. This crimson gold heavenly phoenix probably wouldn't submit even if it died. Moreover, it was very likely that it would burn its bloodline power to nothing before it made a move. Then there was no need to hold back. Thinking of this, the evil spirit stretched out its hand and clenched the air. An extremely powerful suction force suddenly attacked. The blood in Dumpling's body also began to surge rapidly, almost bursting out of her body. A hint of determination flashed in her eyes, and she actually rushed forward with this force. However, at this moment, an extremely resplendent light suddenly erupted from the star darkness sword. The lightning pool dried up, and the last Tianlei also merged into it. This light soared into the sky and instantly pierced through the dark sky. The dark clouds, wind, and thunder were blown away, leaving behind only this brilliant radiance that spread across the entire sky. For a moment, it was as bright as day. This light and pressure were too strong, almost making people unable to look directly at it and unconsciously submit. A hint of shock flashed through the depths of the evil spirit's eyes. At this moment, Chu Liyue's wrist flicked. A crimson gold flame flew out and completely blocked the evil spirit's power. At the same time, a tongue of flame rushed in front of the evil spirit and wrapped around its wrist. The blazing and terrifying power instantly made the evil spirit throw out the small black cage in its hand. Dumpling immediately rushed over and grabbed the thing tightly before returning to Chu Liyue's side. She looked at Chu Liyue with red eyes. "Zichen," Chu Liyue gave her a comforting look. Then she raised her sword with both hands. The sound of a zither came from her body. At the same time, an extremely dazzling light suddenly erupted from the Pantheon record. Chapter 2491. Noticing the commotion, many people raised their heads and looked over. Why is there such a huge commotion in the Pantheon record? No one should continue to ascend to the heavens and become a god now, right? Could this be? Who else could it be? Today, all 13 divine envoys had returned. The 2 priests had also recovered their identities, and their names had appeared in the first volume of the Pantheon record. However, there was only one person whose name had not appeared until now. Yueshan. She didn't even need to think to know that the name under the light was hers. Strange, why would it be now? Everyone was puzzled. Logically speaking, her name should have been revealed as soon as the bloodline totem completely emerged. However, it did not. It had even been delayed until now. Countless pairs of eyes stared intently at the Pantheon record, eagerly and curiously waiting for her name to appear. Rong Xiao stood in front of the main hall with his hands behind his back. The Pantheon record floated silently beside him. He tilted his head slightly and swept his gaze across it, finally landing on the bright light. A name was faintly discernible on it. He slowly tightened his grip. As the light gradually dissipated, everyone could finally see the name clearly. However, they soon realized that something was wrong, because that name seemed to have been burned. Everyone could only vaguely see the word Yueshin. Other than that, they could not see anything else. That small charred mark concealed her surname. Many people looked at each other. What was going on? Why would such a thing happen in the Pantheon record? When the evil spirit saw the name that was burned, a look of shock suddenly flashed across its eyes. Just as it was about to say something, the zither music had already sounded. At the same time, countless stones rolled out of Chu Liyue's hands again. A surging and oppressive fighting spirit surged. In an instant, the atmosphere of the entire world seemed to have changed. Cold silence. Austere. Boundless. Countless images flashed through Chu Liyue's mind. It was the battle 10,000 years ago. Countless cultivators followed her and fought to the death for her. However, although they were dead, their fighting spirit remained. There seemed to be a thick smell of blood in the air. The coarse wind swept in from all directions, almost tearing one's skin apart. His blood was boiling hot, and the fire was blazing. His fighting spirit surged, and the sound of the zither rang out. Chu Liyue looked at the evil spirit, his gaze cold, dignified, and disdainful. In the past, you ambushed the illusory god palace, forced Yi Ling to immolate himself, and killed thousands of my deities. After that, you even occupied the illusory god palace and inverted right and wrong. Now, let's return it all together. As soon as she finished speaking, the sword in her hand fell heavily. As the sword slashed down, it seemed to bring down the radiance that filled the sky along with it. In the blink of an eye, boundless battle intent surged, blotting out the sky and swallowing the evil spirit. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Affected by the sword chi, a deep gully instantly appeared on the ground. Countless people's expressions changed. This strike, chi, 3,000 sword energies crisscrossed, slashing at the evil spirit's body. Chi. Chu Liyue fiercely threw out the star darkness sword, piercing through his chest and nailing him to the Saint Chaos Jade. Flames leaped, burning brightly. An extremely painful and hoarse cry rang out instantly. Resentment, coldness, coldness. Countless people's hearts involuntarily trembled when they heard this cry. But very quickly, this cry was shattered by the sound of a zither. This zither sound came from Chu Liyue's body, drifting to every corner of the illusory god palace. If there was no zither, she would use herself as the zither. If there were no strings, she would use the power of heaven and earth as the strings. Wherever the zither sound went, it would become her divine domain. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared outside the heaven gate. When Wu Yao saw who it was, he was stunned. It was a young man who looked to be in his 20s, wearing a sky blue brocade robe. His figure was tall, and his appearance was incomparably handsome. His entire body exuded a noble, calm, and carefree feeling. There was a faint smile at the corner of his lips. I heard the zither sound, so I came. I wonder if I'm late. His voice was clear and melodious, with a hint of laziness. Wu Yao sized him up for a while, vaguely feeling that this aura was somewhat familiar, but he couldn't quite place it at the moment. You! At this moment, the sound of a zither was heard. The young man looked forward, his eyebrows raised slightly, and the smile at the corner of his lips deepened. You didn't disappoint me. Chu Liyue suddenly noticed something as she looked up and looked over. When that face came into view, her heart skipped a beat, and she narrowed her eyes slightly. Senior Jing? She said the last two words meaningfully. Hearing this, the man immediately put his fist to his lips and coughed. Cough. Long time no see. It seems that you've recovered your memory? Chu Liyue snorted. Wu Yao, why don't you invite Senior Jing in? Hearing this, Wu Yao suddenly remembered something, and he stared at the man in front of him with wide eyes. However, that person had already dusted his clothes and walked in. Everyone looked over, wondering who this peerless man who had suddenly appeared was. He didn't seem to care about these gazes, and in a few steps, he had already crossed the star path and arrived at the gate of the illusory god palace. Everyone was shocked. This person's strength was clearly above that of a god. And he seemed to be even more unfathomable than the oracles. Before anyone could react, the man had already moved and appeared next to the chaotic holy jade. Chu Liyue looked at him. Are you happy to hear me call you senior? Cough. It's just a joke, a joke. The man smiled and raised his hand. After all, I've helped you keep the music score for so many years. Even if I don't deserve credit, I've at least worked hard, right? It's just a small matter. Don't worry about it. Chu Luiyue twitched the corner of her lips. This music score was originally mine, but you said it was yours. How shameless. The man shrugged helplessly. In order to help you keep this music score, I deliberately left a soul in the god-slaying mound, waiting for tens of thousands of years. Isn't that enough? You know, we've only met twice before. If it were someone else, who would be willing to help me like this? Chu Luiyue ignored him. Back then, during the battle of the god-slaying mound, she knew that her life was in danger. So in a hurry, she had to divide the music score into 3 and give it to him to keep. That was the second time they met. The first time was in the southern border of Tianling, and the second time was in the god-slaying mound. It was only then that she found out that the black wall was the boundary between the plains. Because she knew that he wasn't from here, she made a bet and entrusted the music score to him. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. However, they were of the same generation and called each other friends. But he suddenly took advantage of the seniority. It was really... The evil spirit looked at the man in shock and anger. Who the hell are you? The man tidied up his clothes and smiled faintly, giving off an air of elegance. Changel Palace, Yun Mukin, courtesy name Jingming. Chapter 2492. Changel Palace. It had never heard of this name before. However, from the conversation between the two, it was not difficult to deduce this person's background. After a moment, it suddenly thought of something. You're from the outside world? The outside world was naturally outside their plane. It was said that there were 3,000 planes in this world, and each plane had its own small world. There was a barrier between these planes, but it was extremely difficult to cross. Only the top powerhouses could do it. Although it knew this, because it had never been able to secure the position of Master God, it knew that it was untouchable. So it did not think about it. Who knew? This person actually came from the outside world. Then, he should have passed through the wall of the god-slaying tomb. Moreover, it was precisely because of his existence that Chu Luiyue was able to guard the zither score until today. Shangguan Jing was stunned when he heard this voice. Why did it sound familiar? Right. When he first went to the god-slaying tomb, he had also heard this voice. At that time, he had also seen a totem on the wall. It was exactly the same as Chu Luiyue's bloodline totem. Unfortunately, he only took a quick glance and did not pay much attention to it. No wonder he found her totem familiar when he first saw it. All along, it was because she had deliberately left the zither score in the god-slaying tomb, and at the same time, left the mark of the totem there. Yun Mukin looked around. Where's your little attendant? Chu Luiyue knew that he was asking about Chang Wanzhou. The 13 divine envoys had only heard his voice during the final battle in the god-slaying tomb, but they had never seen him in person. Chang Wanzhou was the only exception. At that time, she had brought Chang Wanzhou to Tianling on a whim and stayed in Nanjiang for a while. It was also then that she met this person. In short, no discord, no concord. At that time, she was the master god, and there were very few people who could fight with her. It was rare to meet someone, and they felt like old friends at first sight. Just like that, they became friends. Yun Mukin admired Chang Wanzhou very much. This was because whenever he encountered something, he would clean the house. He could even wipe the tables, chairs, and even the doorposts until they were shiny. Yun Mukin was a clean freak. He once took the initiative to bring it back, but was rejected by Chu Luiyue. In the end, he could only leave with regret. Chu Luiyue raised his eyes and looked at the entrance of the illusory shrine. In fact, Chang Wanzhou had arrived a long time ago, but he didn't come in. Little boat, come here. Chang Wanzhou bowed respectfully and walked over. The corners of Chu Luiyue's lips lifted slightly. You wait by the side first. When the matter is over, clean up this place. Yes. Yun Muchen clicked his tongue and looked envious. Little you are. As soon as these words were shouted, Yun Muchen instantly felt a chill coming from behind. He raised his eyebrows slightly and turned around to take a look. He met a pair of cold and noble eyes. Yun Muchen couldn't help but laugh. He retracted his gaze and continued. Little you er. I'll bring a few people over later. Let little boat help me lead them. Chu Luiyue looked at the evil spirit without looking sideways. I'm not free. Yin Mu Chen. This couple really knew how to turn their backs on one another. However, he also knew in his heart that now wasn't the time to be tangled up. Forget it, forget it. I'll think about it after all these things are settled. Thinking of this, he tactfully retreated. A sword pierced through the heart, the fire burned, and the endless energy of heaven and earth turned into the sound of a zither, surrounding it. This was a dead end. Chu Luiyue stepped forward and looked at it condescendingly. It's a pity that you only have one life. Using one life to pay for all the grievances in the past was really letting it off easy. She raised her hand and was about to deliver the final blow. However, at this moment, the evil spirit suddenly looked up. It laughed, and its tone was strange and strange. Yueshin, you can't kill me. Chu Luiyue ignored it and gathered divine power in her palm. Then he heard it chuckle again, with endless viciousness and complacency, as it said word by word. It seems that you really don't know. I'll live with you. If I die, you can't live alone. If you live, I'll live forever. Yueshin, do you still want to kill me? A gloomy and hoarse voice came. And in an instant, it was like a sudden clap of thunder. Chu Luiyue's body suddenly stiffened. The vast divine power was still surging in her palm. But it didn't fall. Her pupils shrank, and she looked at the pair of scarlet eyes in disbelief. What did you say? Live, die together? The evil spirit laughed even more wildly and raised its voice. The emperor knows about this. The two high priests know. Only, you don't know. Why do you think the high priest and the others chose to take a step back when they clearly had the chance to take me down with them in the god-slaying mound? They only dismembered my body and sealed it in different parts of the god-slaying mound? Why do you think they were willing to sign the contract and be trapped in the Red Moon Desert for 10,000 years and suffer loneliness and loneliness? Do you think that by killing me, you can regain the position of the Divine Master and the world will be at peace? Yueshin, you are too real. Every word, every sentence, was like a sharp knife stabbing at Chu Luiyue's heart. It was a heart-wrenching pain. Chu Luiyue's body seemed to be numb. She trembled slightly, but she couldn't feel anything anymore. Only her internal organs seemed to be crazily squeezed by an invisible force. In an instant, there seemed to be countless invisible wounds in her body. She couldn't touch them, and she couldn't even tell exactly where it hurt. But she could only endure it like this. She slowly turned around and looked at the few figures in front of the main hall from afar. Duga Mabao's expression didn't change. He only looked at her with eyes that were as deep as the sea. Lan Zhao's lips moved slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but he remained silent in the end. Go and ask. Just so that you can be reincarnated again after 10,000 years. How did they beg me back then? It was as if a cold wind suddenly poured into her chest, and it was cold and piercing. Chu Luiyue's vision suddenly blurred. The divine power on her fingertips dissipated. At this moment, it seemed as if all the strength in her body had been sucked away. Endless fatigue surged and almost drowned her. Ask. Is there a need to ask? She pressed her heart tightly, but it was still difficult for her to breathe. There's no need to ask. She knew their temperament the best. Such proud, arrogant people. In order to keep her soul, in order to let her be reincarnated, in order to let her return, in order to let her. What have they done? She thought of the yellow sand that filled the sky in the Red Moon Desert, and the cage under the lake that couldn't see the light of day. She thought of Debao's shyness and embarrassment when he forcefully refined his divine body and turned into a child in order to save her. She thought of Lan Zhao standing by the lake and happily changing his appearance every day, but he always said that his original appearance was the best. She thought of Diwu Zhangza always coming out to smooth things over when she was exhausted and persuading Debao to let her rest. There was no wind more lonely and rough than the Red Moon Desert. It crushed and blew away all the pride and dignity. Chapter 2493. Diwu Zhangza and the others had just arrived at the heavenly gate when they clearly heard these heart-wrenching words. Yu Jiao and Mu Hongyu were both stunned. Then, they slowly turned their heads and looked at Diwu Zhangza. He clenched his fists, and his expression turned cold. Yu Jiao cut the bridge. Yu Jiao was stunned. What? Diwu Zhangzi suddenly looked at him and said in a low voice. I said cut the bridge and close the door. Yu Jiao finally understood that he was talking about the bridge outside that connected to the illusionary god ocean. But, hurry. Diwu Zhangzi didn't give any explanation and hurriedly urged. At this moment, an inch-long stream of green light suddenly floated in front of Yu Jiao. A line of words gradually appeared. Yu Jiao was slightly shocked. Big Brother actually sent the same order as Diwu Zhangzi. He pursed his lips and no longer hesitated. He turned around, raised his sword, and slashed down fiercely. The sword fell, and sparks instantly flew on the silver bridge. Countless Xian formations appeared, but after meeting the green sword energy, they were quickly annihilated. This sword was personally refined by Cini, and it was extremely powerful. Even if this silver bridge was formed by countless Xian formations, when the two met, it was still as easy as crushing dry weeds. Below, the waves seemed to be surging even more violently. Yu Jiao mobilized all the power in his body and desperately cut it. Finally, he heard an explosion. The last Xian formation connected to the heavenly gate was also cut. Just this sword had almost exhausted all the divine power in Yu Jiao's body. Diwu Zhangzi quickly looked at Wu Yao. At this moment, Wu Yao also received Sun Yi's order, and immediately closed the door without hesitation. Creak, the heavenly gate closed. Some people hurriedly looked back, but quickly retracted their gazes. At this moment, their attention was all on the illusionary god palace. To be precise, it was on that woman. Chu Liuyue's throat was dry, and she almost couldn't breathe. Her lips moved, and she asked softly. In other words, in these 10,000 years, they can't refine their divine bodies or take a step out of the Red Moon Desert. Then Wei Yu is just monitoring them. The evil spirit sneered. Unfortunately, they still couldn't abide by the contract. From the day the high priestess privately refined her divine body, the contract was already invalid. Chu Lue stared ahead, but his vision was blurry. The corners of her lips curled up slightly, but she was exhausted. In the end, she still fell back down. So, you brought them back to the illusory god palace in advance? Let them suffer all kinds of torture? This is what they deserve. In these 10,000 years, they violated the contract and brought you to the Red Moon Desert to cultivate. They also secretly saved you several times. Do they really think I don't know? Lan Xiao finally couldn't hold it in any longer. Don't talk as if you're so noble. During this period of time, if it weren't for you repeatedly making a move and vainly attempting to seize the zither score with insidious means, how could we have made a move to counterattack? Chu Lue closed his eyes. I see, so that was how it was. Today's battle between the two of us will not determine victory or defeat. If you want the position of Divine Master, go ahead and take it back. However, if you want my life, can you do it? The evil spirit's voice was evil and arrogant. If Chu Lue wanted to kill it, he would also die. In this world, no one could easily make such a decision. Thus, it was certain that in today's battle, even if it couldn't win, it definitely wouldn't lose. However, at this moment, a deep and cold voice suddenly came from the main hall of the illusory god palace. She can't, but I can. This voice carried the might of thunder and reverberated in all directions. Chu Lue suddenly raised his eyes. He saw Rong Xiu pointing at him with a long sword in his hand. That sword was completely black, with only a line of brilliant gold in the middle that shone with resplendent light. Boundless pressure suddenly descended upon them. Everyone was stunned on the spot. What did the emperor mean? He wanted to kill the evil spirit. But wouldn't that kill Chu Lue as well? Jun Jiuqing's heart jumped as he looked at Lan Xiao. You're crazy. Who is he going to kill? Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes. What, you want to rely on your gu refinement technique? Jun Jiuqing's pupil shrunk. So you do know. Rong Xiu looked at him coldly. You can try. Jun Jiuqing gritted his teeth and suddenly took out a black hammer. Chu Lue looked at it and immediately recognized that it was the hammer that Wei Zhe used back then. However, it looked different from before as there were many blood-red patterns on it. It looked eerie and cold. At the next moment, Jun Jiuqing injected a trace of divine power, and the blood-red patterns on it seemed to come alive as they swam back and forth. At this moment, the evil spirit suddenly shouted angrily, "Jun Jiuqing, you dare to betray me!" Around its body, blood-red patterns also appeared, and they were twisting crazily. One could vaguely hear countless shrill screams coming from within. The evil spirit's aura was shrinking continuously. Jun Jiuqing said, "If I can't kill him, I can use his soul as a guide and devour his blood to refine goo to form a prison." When he had just returned to the main hall of the illusory god palace, he had secretly left this method behind. As long as, bam bam bam, before Jun Jiuqing could finish his words, a series of explosions could be heard. The blood-red patterns that were twisting around the evil spirit suddenly shattered. Jun Jiuqing's expression changed. At the next moment, a cold and violent force swept over. He immediately threw out the thing in his hand. Boom! Everything vanished into thin air. To think that I chose you as the successor of the high priest back then, and summoned your soul back 10,000 years later. Jun Jiuqing, this is how you repay me. The evil spirit was flustered and exasperated. Evidently, Jun Jiuqing's actions made it extremely angry and hateful. Chu Luiyue suddenly realized something, and stared at Jun Jiuqing. Yi Xiang. Family Yi's ancestor. But didn't he follow the evil spirit back then? Now, Jun Jiuqing's expression was gloomy. This situation was probably unsolvable. Was Rong Xiu really going to kill her as well? The evil spirit sneered and gritted its teeth as it questioned coldly. Emperor, are you going to interfere with the matter of the illusory god palace? Rong Xiu's gaze was cold. I have already taken action 10,000 years ago. What difference is there in today's battle? His words were like a sudden clap of thunder that exploded in everyone's hearts. What did you say? The evil spirit was shocked. Then it suddenly remembered something, and looked at the burned name on the myriad god record. You. Before it could say a word, Rong Xiu's sword had already arrived. Extremely fast. Extremely accurate. Extremely ruthless. Chu Luiyue only saw a bright light flash before her eyes. At the next moment, a painful groan could be heard from behind her. The sword energy brushed past her ear, and her hair fluttered lightly before falling back down. She looked back. The evil spirit's body had already started to burn and curl up at a speed visible to the naked eye. She looked at her surroundings and saw that it was calm. It seemed that she wasn't affected at all. The evil spirit was obviously shocked by the scene in front of it. It suddenly opened its eyes wide. You cut off the life between us. How is that possible? For 10,000 years, you have never entered the main hall of the illusory god palace. However, the only one who could do this was the celestial emperor alone. Suddenly it trembled. Whose hand did you borrow? Rong Xiu's thin lips curled up slightly, but his gaze was as cold as a glacier that wouldn't melt for 10,000 years. He said indifferently, the day you sent Mu Qinghe to Tianling, I erased his memory. Chapter 2494. In the sky, the clouds gathered and dispersed. A wind blew past, bringing with it the faint smell of blood that lingered at the tip of the nose. There was no sound. At this moment, the scene seemed to have frozen. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Rong Xiu's words echoed in her ears. Over and over again. He said, on the day Mu Qinghe was sent to Tianling by the evil spirit, he erased his memory? Then, it was as if something had smashed heavily on her heart, causing a dull pain. She slowly turned around and looked at Mu Qinghe. He knelt on the ground, covered in wounds and almost dead. As if sensing her gaze, his body moved, and then he raised his head with difficulty and looked over. His face was pale and messily stained with a few streaks of blood. That pair of cold and indifferent eyes seemed to have a layer of ice gradually melting, revealing a bit of light. Then, he looked at her and smiled. He was in such a sorry state, but his eyes were warm, just like the first time they met. The only difference from that time was that his smile was extremely shallow and full of timidity, concealing his nervousness and fear. Now the corners of his lips were relaxed, and he was so frank and relieved. There was a riot in the palace of the illusory god, and the two sides were in conflict. He was sent to Tianling to wait for an opportunity to snatch the zither score. But no one knew that the emperor, who was supposed to be alone, secretly made a move and changed everything. Chu Liyue's mind was in a mess. When did you recover your memory? Mu Qinghe paused. A few days before Her Highness' accident. The evil spirit suddenly spoke with a sharp and crazy voice. No. Even if her life was cut off, at least one of them should have died. I was fine in the palace of the illusory god for 10,000 years, so she should be the one who died. She is indeed dead. Rong Xiu's expression was indifferent. At the foot of Thousand Wine Mountain, after you use private means to awaken her memory in the palace of the illusory god in advance, I also erased all her memories except for Tianling, and sent her back to Tianling. At that time, Chu Liyue had just broken through to the high god realm. Because he entered the Myriad Wine Mountain, he was forcibly awakened from his memories in the illusion god palace. Under those circumstances, she would definitely die if she faced it. Thus he chose to start over. It was also a good opportunity to sever the connection between the two of them. The evil spirit stared blankly for a long time before it finally came to a realization. So that's how it is. That's how it is. It was you who helped her escape and enter the cycle of reincarnation. It was you who did everything you could to find a way out for her. Let me think. When did you make your move? You had already interfered in the battle 10,000 years ago, right? Were you the one who protected the 13 divine envoys and sent them to Tianling? Even the attendants that she is most comfortable with have not been left behind. Not only that, haha. Celestial Emperor, you've calculated well. You've even schemed against Mu Qinghe. After she returned to Tianling, you had Mu Qinghe help her die and change her life. In these 10,000 years, everyone and everything was under your control. You've really calculated everything. Huh? The hoarse and sharp voice echoed in the sky above the illusion god palace, clearly falling into everyone's ears. Other than this voice, everyone else was deathly silent. These words and these things were far beyond their imagination. It took a long time for them to regain their senses. Chu Liyue was in a daze. Countless scenes appeared and intertwined in her mind. It was as if there was a thread that finally connected the fragments into a complete story. The questions that had troubled her for a long time were finally dispelled at this time. And she found the final answer. Mu Qinghe looked at her deeply and chuckled softly. Actually, at that time, he had recovered his memories very suddenly. He only understood later that the Celestial Emperor had done it on purpose. He was sure that he would make the choice he wanted at the last moment. Of course, the result was indeed so. He sat quietly in his room for 3 days. In the end, on that day, he intercepted her calls for help 3 times and ended her life in Tianling. He helped Rong Xiu cross the sky and sea to find a way out for her. He also brought Rong Xiu's power into the illusion god palace and cut off her life force with the evil spirit. It was also after that he beat her at her own game and went to Emo Shiqian, who had also had a part of his memory erased, and pretended that nothing had happened. Mu Qinghe's breath gradually weakened, and even his vision blurred. If he confessed all of this publicly, the evil spirit naturally had a way to kill him. But he was already prepared. He tried hard to open his eyes, wanting to see her face again. Unfortunately, the blood fell and merged into his eyes, and he could not see clearly. After a long time he chuckled softly. Your Highness, you're right. I am indeed a traitor. In my life, I only chose to betray another person for you. Your Highness. He spoke softly, his voice hoarse. Back then, I really didn't know how to write the word you. His voice gradually dissipated in the wind. Large patches of blood spread out beneath his body. Hong Yao suddenly flew over and leaned on his shoulder. Its claws grabbed his clothes tightly, and big drops of tears fell. But finally, all sounds were annihilated. However, his eyes were still staring at her in a daze. Hong Yao leaned against him, and finally stopped moving. Only the last tear hung at the corner of its eye and did not fall for a long time. The evil spirit muttered, and its laughter became strange. You are the Emperor. Who in this world can calculate better than you? Unfortunately, Rong Xiu, as the Emperor, you have already betrayed the heavenly Tao for your own selfish interests. Today, you won't be able to escape the punishment of the heavenly Tao. Chu Liyue was shocked. Rong Xiu's thin scarlet lips curled up slightly in a faint smile. I entered the Illusion God Palace today with no intention of leaving alive. Chapter 2495. His low and pleasant voice sounded so calm and collected. It was as if he was talking about an insignificant matter. Chu Liuyue's heart was beating like a drum. Rongxiu. Rongxiu looked at her. His eyes were thick and clear, and they reflected her figure. Rongxiu, you are the Celestial Emperor, and you have controlled the gods of the human world for tens of thousands of years. How high and mighty you are. Unparalleled. But now, you want to bury all of this with your own hands just for her. You're crazy. You're crazy. The evil spirit's shrill voice sounded. It was extremely ear-piercing. Chu Liuyue's heart suddenly felt like it was being tightly grasped by something. However, Rongxiu's face didn't change at all. The next moment he raised his hand and clenched it. Boom! A ball of golden and black flames suddenly surged out of the sword and completely burned the evil spirit. You will regret it. You will regret. The flames burned silently. The voice finally dissipated gradually. There was dead silence inside and outside the illusory god palace. Chu Liyue was stunned. Her mind went blank for a moment. Then, she suddenly remembered that when she met Jun Jiuqing again in the illusory god palace, he said that Rongxiu was crazy. At that time, she only thought that he said it afterward. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that today would come? The moment she knew that he was the Celestial Emperor, she knew that this man must have schemed against her a lot. Otherwise, he wouldn't have deliberately sealed her memory in the Black Pyramid and hidden it from her for so long. Illusory God Palace. Divine Ruins World. Tianling. Yao Chen. He had followed her all the way. Even though she had gone through several life and death situations, he was still unwilling to let go. Since 10,000 years ago, he had already betrayed the heavenly Tao and predicted today's calamity. He had also calculated his own life and death. If such a person wasn't crazy, what was he? At this moment, the evil spirit's last breath was cut off. A brilliant light suddenly appeared in the sky. Chu Liyue looked up. Above the dark sky, a ray of light gushed out from behind the clouds and gradually dissipated. The streams of light crisscrossed with each other, outlining complicated and mysterious patterns. In the end, they formed a huge astrolabe. The light it emitted was divine and dazzling, making it almost impossible for people to look directly at it. They subconsciously felt reverence and submission. An indescribable aura of a nine heavens supreme fell from the sky. Plop! Outside the illusory god palace, there were already people who couldn't withstand the pressure and aura, kneeling on the ground in reverence. The supreme of the heavenly Tao. All living beings in the world bowed their heads before him. With the first, there was soon a second, a third soon. Outside the illusory god palace, a large group of people knelt down. Similar scenes were happening all over the human world. Peach Blossom Dock. Within the U residence, Lin Qifei was currently researching a profound formation in his room. The sky outside suddenly brightened, and then sounds of discussion could be heard. He stood up in surprise and pushed open the door. Only then did he see that many people had already gathered in the courtyard. At this moment, they were all looking up at the sky with shock and awe. Lin Qifei looked up curiously. There was a profound formation in the sky all of a sudden? No, that wasn't a profound formation. Streams of light flashed on it, and the astrolabe's layout was perfect. It was as if it was embedded in this world. This was the heavenly Tao was descending. At this moment, a stream of light flowed. A powerful aura descended, and everyone in the courtyard knelt on the ground. The light was so bright that people couldn't look directly at it. Suddenly, a huge mirror slowly appeared. Doubts instantly appeared in everyone's minds. Is the world shaking? Tianling Dynasty Imperial Capital. Zhaoyu Hall. Sheng Guanyu stood under the porch with his hands behind his back. Sigh. I wonder when you will come back to visit, he muttered. Suddenly, a stream of light appeared in the sky. He frowned slightly and looked up, only to see an astrolabe floating quietly in the air. The aura descended, and he felt a weight on his shoulders. At the same time, a mirror appeared in the sky. His expression changed slightly. For some reason, he suddenly felt a strong sense of uneasiness in his heart. Bright dawn. On the streets, There was a hubbub of voices. At a certain moment, the sky changed. "Look! What's going on?" someone in the crowd exclaimed. Everyone raised their heads and looked towards the source of the voice. However, they felt that the pressure was extremely heavy. It was truly unbearable. Soon, the crowd fell to their knees, their hearts full of shock and awe. A mirror also appeared in the sky above. The heavenly path descended with supreme aura. It covered the entire world. Mountains, rivers, forests, deserts, countless creatures in every corner were covered by the heavenly path's aura. At the same time, mirrors appeared one after another. A beam of light suddenly descended from the sky and swept across these mirrors, reflecting a dazzling light. Soon, the light fell on the mirror in the Peach Blossom Dock's door realm. In an instant, tiny ripples spread out like water waves. That beautiful face became clearer and clearer, and gradually, even her entire figure became clearer. In an instant, the astrolabe shone brightly. Illusory God Palace. The dazzling light fell from the sky and fell on Rong Xiao. However, the light did not stop on him. Instead, it continued to move and finally came to Chu Liuyue's eyes. Looking at the approaching light, Chu Liuyue's heart suddenly beat faster. She instinctively felt something was wrong and wanted to retreat. However, the aura had already overturned her body, and she could not move at all. In the next moment, the light finally fell on her body. In an instant, Chu Liyue felt as if a pair of extremely sharp eyes swept across her body. From the inside to the outside, he saw her clearly and thoroughly. Rong Xiao. A voice filled with vicissitudes of life came from the heavens and instantly spread throughout the world. "Do you admit your mistake?" Rong Xiao's expression did not change. "I know. She was just a peach blossom born in the chaos 100,000 years ago. You carefully took care of her for 90,000 years, and finally guided her soul into her body, and helped her become the master of the illusory God Palace. I know all of this, and had no intention of interfering. However, she was born with the evil spirit, and could not be tolerated by heaven and earth. But you kept her alive until today. 10,000 years ago, I ordered you to kill her. But you guided the evil spirit into your body, and separated her from the evil spirit. You also took advantage of the evil spirit, and sent her into the cycle of reincarnation. After the incident, I left 3,000 mirrors in the world to search for her whereabouts. But there was no result. Only now do I know that you have already stolen the sky and replaced her. You burned her name in the Pantheon record, and sent her into the second cycle of reincarnation without permission. Rong Xiao, do you admit to all of this?" Rong Xiao raised his chin slightly and said, "I admit. Back then, you cut off the life force between her and the evil spirit, but in order to send her into the second cycle of reincarnation, you directly cut off half of your divine meridians, and gave her a new life force. Now, although the evil spirit is dead, your divine meridians are half destroyed, and you have lost the qualifications of an imperial emperor. Do you regret it?" The might of the heavenly Tao was overwhelming. Rong Xiao's lips curved slightly, and his eyes were clear. "I don't regret it." Chapter 2496. He knew his mistake. He admitted his guilt. But he said that he did not regret it. The surroundings were silent. Only a gentle breeze could be heard. Chu Liyue suddenly felt that the light that enveloped her was too dazzling. It was so dazzling that it hurt her eyes. At this moment, she actually felt a little timid. She did not dare to listen anymore. He had done so much for her, but she did not know at all. But he was her husband. He was the person she had promised to spend the rest of her life with. How could she not know anything? She did not even notice it at all. "Rong Xiao, your divine meridians are damaged. You have committed many crimes. Now, you should be punished." That ancient and distant voice reverberated between the heavens and the earth. The huge astrolabe started to rotate slowly. A light curtain fell from the sky and trapped Rong Xiao within it. He raised his head slightly. There was no regret or fear in his eyes. "I will accept all the punishments." As soon as he finished speaking, a stream of light flew out from the astrolabe. It transformed into a sharp arrow and shot toward Rong Xiao at an incomparably fast speed. Chi! That sharp arrow pierced through his left knee. In an instant, the sharp arrow was annihilated. Blood splattered everywhere. His bones were shattered. Roar! Shueshua leaped and pounced over. However, before it could get close to the light curtain, it was blocked by an extremely powerful pressure. It was easily knocked to the ground. It got up and charged forward again. Then its body was thrown out again. A trail of blood appeared on the ground. Rongxiu looked at it. Shueshue, go back. Shueshue refused. It whimpered and charged forward. Soon its body was stained with blood. Chi! A second arrow flew over. This time it was his right knee. The bones in both his knees were broken. The pressure of the heavenly Tao descended and pressed down on his body. Plop! With a muffled sound, the tall figure knelt on the ground. Chu Liyue's heart seemed to have been shaken by something. Her heart was trembling. Since you have admitted your mistake, kneel in front of thousands of people. Return all of your divine power to me. As soon as he finished speaking, the third arrow pierced through Rongxiu's chest. His body shook, and he finally spat out a mouthful of blood. Rongxiu! Chu Liyue quickly ran in his direction. When Shueshue heard her, she turned around and ran over. She ran around her feet and whimpered. The closer he got, the thicker and heavier the heavenly Tao pressure became. Every step forward consumed more strength and spirit than the previous one. Her speed gradually slowed down, and in the end, she stopped outside the light screen, unable to get any closer. She was only a few steps away from him, but she was so far away that she couldn't touch him. Chu Liyue's heart seemed to be on fire. From the moment she saw Rongxiu kneel down, the last string in her mind snapped. He was so noble and proud. How could he kneel like this? How many people in the world were watching this scene? She pressed her hand on the light screen. Under her palm, it was burning hot and stinging. However, this couldn't compare to the pain in her heart. She opened her mouth and wanted to speak, but she couldn't make a sound. Her chest was stuffy and painful, and even breathing became painful. The pain spread from his heart to every inch of his body, every part of his body. She couldn't break free. Rongxiu supported himself with one hand and coughed, then slowly straightened up. Although he was kneeling, his posture was straight, as if he would never bend. He raised his hand and wiped away the dark red blood from the corner of his mouth. Then, he turned to look at her. You are. He chuckled. It's just kneeling. It's no big deal. Back in Yaochun, he had also knelt in order to marry her. Chu Liyue's eyes were red, and hot tears finally fell. Rongxiu frowned slightly and smiled helplessly. Don't cry. I can't help you wipe your tears now. Just as he finished speaking, another sharp arrow pierced through his left shoulder. A few drops of blood splattered on the light screen and landed in front of her eyes. They were quickly burned clean by the terrifying power on the light screen. She almost felt as if the blood had landed on her face and body. It was hot and painful. She opened her eyes and looked at him, but her tears fell even more fiercely. Rongxiu's gaze was gentle. He suddenly thought of something and asked softly, Are you angry that I lied to you? He paused for a moment and wiped away the blood that flowed out from the corner of his lips before continuing. You should be angry. His eyes became deeper, as if he was recalling something. However, two small shadows of her were clearly reflected in the depths of his eyes. After a moment, he said gently, In Yaochun, when you woke up in the forest, I lied to you and said that you trespassed on someone else's territory. In Tianling, when you accidentally said that you would surpass me on the Azure Cloud Roll next time, I lied to you and said that I had never heard of this place. In Peach Blossom Dock, when you asked me if I recognized the armillary shield, I lied to you and said that I didn't. Kingly, the son of God. These identities were all lies. Even the identity of the first master was hidden from you for many years. I only told you a few days ago. Rongxiu said word by word as he recounted the past. Actually, how could he count it all? From the beginning, he had lied to her. When he told a lie, he had to cover it up with countless lies. More and more streams of light turned into sharp arrows that pierced through his body and were annihilated. All that was left were wounds and bloodstains. He was wearing a black robe, and the bloodstains on it were not obvious. However, gradually as the blood increased, it wet his clothes bit by bit. His face became pale, and his breath became weaker and weaker. Tens of thousands of years of divine power, was being extracted one by one. This kind of pain was no different from being skinned alive and cut into pieces. He gently exhaled, and a thick blood aura spread out. But, at that time, I said that I was Rong Xiao, and I didn't lie to you. I begged to marry you no matter what, and I didn't lie to you. I said that I waited for you for a long time, and I didn't lie to you. I said that marrying you as my wife was a blessing of 3 lifetimes, and I didn't lie to you. Chi. A sharp arrow suddenly pierced towards his heart from the back. The huge impact made his body tremble, and he barely supported himself with one hand. The ground in front of him was also covered in sticky and sweet blood. On the back of his hand, blue veins could be faintly seen. Chu Luiyue slowly slid down to kneel down. Separated by a light screen, they looked at each other from afar. He took a deep breath, and subconsciously raised his hand to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. However, he was shocked to find that there were several wounds on the back of his hand, and blood was flowing out. Tens of thousands of arrows had taken away his divine power for the past 100,000 years. Only the last bit of divine power left quietly dissipated with these bloody wounds. He looked at it in a daze, and then put his hand down again. Forget it. He raised his eyes and looked at her deeply, as if he wanted to engrave her appearance deeply. I know that my Yuer hates it when people lie to her. But this time, don't be angry, okay? Chu Luiyue bit her lips tightly, and a sweet and fishy taste filled her mouth. She looked at him and suddenly smiled. Hot tears kept falling down her cheeks. Yes, I hate it when people lie to me. But Rong Xiao, if the person who lied to me is you, then it's okay. What did you lie to me about? My body, my heart, they all belong to you. What else do you want? You lied to me to believe you, lied to me to love you, lied to me to be jealous of you, lied to me to be unable to sleep because of you, lied to me to live and die with you, lied to me to follow you to the heavens and the underworld. If that's the case, then you'll lie to me for a lifetime, okay? Chapter 2497. Her voice was very soft but also very heavy. She handed over all her trust and love to him in such a straightforward manner. Chu Luiyue thought that there was probably no one in this world who was better at deceiving others than her. Rong Xiao, you said before that you came here with the intention of dying today. You lied to me, didn't you? She looked at him, her eyes flickering with fragmentary light, with an extremely humble expectation and desire that even she herself did not notice. Rong Xiao's lips moved slightly. Just as he was about to speak, he heard an ancient and distant voice with endless pressure. As the emperor, Rong Xiao should uphold justice, but for his own selfish desires, he went against the heavenly Tao. Today he must die. However, you don't have to worry. After he dies, the next one will be you. Rong Xiao's expression suddenly changed, and he looked up abruptly. She has already cut off her life with the evil spirit, and everything that happened here was caused by me alone. Why implicate her? Rong Xiao, at this point, you still want to protect her? Don't forget, 10,000 years ago, I already ordered you to kill her. You've already pushed back her lifespan by over 10,000 years. Could it be that this isn't enough? Today both you and her will die. Every word was resolute, and could not be disobeyed. Rong Xiao's hand slowly tightened. Today he took the initiative to die, in order to leave her a way out. But now, it seemed that it was impossible. A dark light flashed across his eyes. At this moment on the light screen, a stream of light suddenly turned into a sharp arrow, piercing towards Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue knew that it was not good, but under the pressure of the heavenly Tao, there was no time to retreat. In a hurry, she used all the strength in her body to dodge to the side. That sharp arrow brushed past her neck, narrowly missing her. A bloodstain instantly appeared on her slender and fair neck. The dark red bloodstain was reflected in Rong Xiao's eyes, and it was like a spark that set the prairie ablaze. Soon after, flames began to burn in the depths of their deep eyes. One was black, and the other was bright gold. An extremely terrifying aura suddenly erupted from his body. Chu Luiyue was shocked. She looked over and met his extremely cold eyes. Boom! The black and gold flames instantly surged out of Rong Xiao's body and overturned him. Her heart sank. Rong Xiao. The messy bloodstains were quickly burned away, and the broken bones and cracked wounds were also rapidly regenerated under the burning of the flames. Everyone was shocked by this sudden change of events. Countless pairs of eyes looked at this scene, unable to regain their senses for a long time. However, Yunmyukin suddenly narrowed his eyes. This is... The flames burned fiercely, and Rongxiu's figure gradually blurred. However, the aura that was constantly spreading from his body was still rising crazily. Crack! A cracking sound was heard. It was the powerful light curtain that was affected by this power and instantly shattered. Chulua was shocked. The next moment, she saw the black and gold flames quickly condense into a sword. Rongxiu's figure came into her sight again. His black brocade robe was tattered, but the bloodstains on it seemed to have been burned clean. The body under the robe was tall and straight, and all the injuries had disappeared. Swoosh! He waved his wrist, and the sword instantly cut through the space. The hand that held the sword also recovered to its original state. It was strong, and the joints were distinct. There were no more fine wounds. The most different thing was his eyes. Those deep and clear eyes were now completely occupied by the two balls of flames. Just one look at them was enough to make people unconsciously submit. Compared to the power of the way of heaven, it was actually not inferior. A ridiculous and bold idea suddenly came to Chuluo's mind. Rongxiu had broken through? He stared at her, and then walked toward her. Without the light curtain, the two of them were only a few steps apart. He came to her and reached out his hand. Chuluo did not think and reached out her hand. He used his long arm to pull her up easily and took her into his arms. Without any rest or hesitation, he held the sword with one hand and held her slender waist with the other. He bent down and kissed her fiercely. This kiss was deep and long. After a long time, when she almost could not stand, he finally stopped. He tilted his head slightly and sucked away the tears at the corner of her eyes. Chuluo's heart swelled with jealousy. The joy and sadness of regaining what she had lost swallowed her. She leaned into his arms, and her hands clutched his clothes tightly. Feeling the warmth under his clothes and his strong heartbeat, her heart finally calmed down gradually. Rongxiu, he kissed her eyebrows. His voice was low and gentle, as if he was afraid of disturbing her. However, every word and sentence seemed to be suppressing the insanity in his bones. I've calculated everything and waited for 10,000 years before I stole a lifetime to be your husband. Now that the heavens want to kill you, I'll crush the clouds and go against the heavens. As his voice fell, he let go of her. With a tap of his foot, he soared into the sky. He floated in the air, holding a black gold sword, and his clothes fluttered. The next moment, he pointed his sword to the sky. His fighting spirit was clear. That ancient and distant voice was tinged with a trace of anger. Rongxiu, how dare you? Rongxiu smiled coldly. Whether I dare or not, you'll know soon. Since he followed the way of heaven and was punished, he could not exchange her life. Then there was no need to endure anymore. A gust of wind blew. Suddenly, a puzzled voice came from the crowd. What's that? Chuluo looked up. A peach blossom drifted over with the wind from afar. Her heart skipped a beat. Was this a peach blossom from the ruined garden? At this moment, the peach blossom drifted in front of Rongxiu and landed silently on his sword. The pinkish-white color quickly faded, revealing the intertwining dark and bright gold inside. Swish! At the moment of contact, the peach blossom turned into a cluster of flames and merged with the sword. Then, a second, a third, countless peach blossoms drifted in the air and scattered in half of the sky. Under the dazzling light, blood and chi surged and peach blossoms drifted down. This scene was like a dream. It was so unreal. Chuluo narrowed her eyes slightly. When the last peach blossom landed on Rongxiu's sword, she closed her eyes. The sound of the wind in her ears suddenly stopped. Rongxiu slashed down with his sword. The boundless sword intent of the dark and bright gold intertwined and crisscrossed, breaking through the sky. At the same time, the mirror in the peach blossom dock's gate suddenly shattered. Crash! The same scene happened everywhere in the human world. The 3,000 mirrors left by the heavenly axiom were all broken at this moment. Illusionary God Ocean. The dark and turbulent sea suddenly condensed, and turned into endless snow in the blink of an eye. Then, the snow seemed to be summoned by some kind of power, and flew toward the heavenly gate. A faint cyan barrier suddenly appeared. The ice and snow melted instantly upon contact. Boom! As the sword fell, a crack appeared on the astrolabe. Then, the surrounding energy of heaven and earth began to crazily rush toward the crack. However, at this moment, Chu Liyue opened her eyes. In an instant, streaks of green flowing light appeared everywhere in the illusionary god palace. That was a barrier. Furthermore, this wasn't just a simple barrier. It was the result of countless barriers intersecting and fusing with one another. The huge illusionary god palace was completely covered by this barrier. A fog-like green barrier appeared in front of Chu Liyue's eyes. She raised the corner of her mouth slightly, then raised her hand and tapped lightly. Fall! This low chant instantly spread across the entire world. After a short period of silence, a pure white snowflake suddenly floated down from the sky. Wherever the snowflake passed, space and energy froze. The green barrier covered the entire illusionary god palace. Soon, countless snowflakes fell and occupied every inch of the mountains, rivers, and plants, unable to absorb the energy of heaven and earth. The crack on the astrolabe could not be repaired. Rongxiu slashed again. Crack. The astrolabe was completely shattered. In an instant, the dazzling flowing light on the astrolabe dimmed. At the same time, the terrifying heavenly axiom's pressure also dissipated. Rongxiu's low and majestic voice was transmitted to the ears of millions of people in the world at this moment. The past is the past. Today's battle will let bygones be bygones. From now on, we will not interfere with each other's business and live in peace. If you attack again and hurt my wife, Rongxiu will definitely risk my life to accompany you. With that, he flicked his wrist, and a sword flew into the shattered astrolabe. Boom! The flames burned fiercely. Chu Liyue raised her head and glanced at it. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly, and her eyes curved. I forgot to say something. Even if he is an emperor, he will still have to marry me and become my husband. At this point, the last flame burned out. The dark clouds gradually dispersed, and the sky became clear. All the violent energy gradually calmed down, and everything returned to normal. The green barrier faded bit by bit, leaving only the falling snowflakes. Rongxiu moved and returned to her side. He was about to speak when Chu Liyue suddenly stepped forward and grabbed his hand. Follow me. With that, she pulled him in a certain direction. Sini, I'll leave this place to you. Chu Liyue's voice came from afar. The void rippled, and Sun Yi's figure appeared in front of the chaos holy jade. He placed a hand on his left chest and nodded respectfully. Yes. Chu Liyue and Rongxiu walked side by side at a leisurely pace. A thin layer of snow quickly covered the path of the illusory god palace. After a few turns, the two arrived at a courtyard. The door was tightly shut, but several black branches extended from the top of the wall. There was no sign. After the chaos 10,000 years ago, this place only had a vague name, abandoned garden. Chu Liyue looked at Rongxiu with her starry eyes. Let's go in and take a look. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly, stepped forward, and pushed open the door. He chuckled. I've taken care of this place for 10,000 years. I'm most familiar with it. Creak. The moment the door opened, Rongxiu's voice suddenly stopped. Large swathes of peach trees grew in the garden, stretching as far as the eye could see. But at this moment, the peach trees that had withered for 10,000 years were blooming with pinkish-white peach blossoms. Translucent white snow drifted down one after another, covering the ground with a layer of white. White snow was also piled up on the spreading branches and clusters of peach blossoms. He stood there in a daze for a long time. It had been far too long since he had seen such a scene. Chu Liyue came to his side, tilted her head and smiled. Your Highness, you said you've seen it before. Snow dancing in the sky and peach blossoms shining brightly. Now I've seen it too. She turned her gaze slightly and looked forward. There seemed to be flowing light in her eyes. It's indeed very beautiful. Rongxiu looked at her exquisite side profile and said, It is very beautiful. Then he suddenly closed the door behind him. Chu Liyue was stunned. Before she could say anything, she was pulled inside. Soon, her back was pressed against the trunk of a blossoming peach tree. He wrapped one hand around her waist, supporting her from behind. His other hand held her chin, and he kissed her. His kiss was very hurried, his breath hot, and his breathing gradually quickened. She almost melted into spring water, melting in his arms. Then his hand stroked her waist. But in the next moment, a soft, boneless hand suddenly pressed down on his hand. He looked at her, his voice especially low and hoarse. "You?" Her face was dyed with a bit of crimson, her starry eyes were even more dazzling, and her full and soft lips were moist and sweet. Just a glance made him feel even hotter. He leaned closer and bit her white and tender earlobe. Her body went limp, and her arms wrapped around his neck. She leaned into his arms, as if this was the only way she could rely on him. But she still shook her head. "No." Then she slightly raised her head, moved closer to his ear, and said softly with a red face, "I think I have." Rong Xiu's body stiffened, and he finally stopped moving. He lowered his head slightly and looked at the person in his arms. She was looking at him eagerly, but there was a hint of ridicule in her eyes, as if she was waiting for a good show. He narrowed his eyes, took a deep breath, and finally kissed her lips, carefully holding her in his arms. Snowflakes fell, and the blooming peach blossoms swayed gently in the breeze. There was a faint sound of human voices. "When did it happen?" "About more than a month." "Then it's time to prepare. What name should we give her?" "Think about it." "No, you or should name our daughter." "How do you know it's a daughter?" "It must be." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.